Rarely has mankind hesitated to eradicate the creatures that stand in the path of his conquest. If we find intelligent species, ritual extraterrestrials, undesirable invaders from another world, they must be destroyed if possible in our dark past. Watch and pray.
Welcome to Close Encounters of the Podcast Kind, Episode 3. I am Alex Tasker, and we have resident tinfoil man, Nick.
Tasker,
Yeah?
why don't you come over here and sit on my lap? Tell me what you want for your birthday, buddy. What do you want for your birthday? Sit on my lap.
Okay, I'm shuffling over. I want to, not be manhandled anymore before bedtime.
You're welcome.
No.
The gift is now yours. I'll stop it.
So obviously post-Christmas has been hard on all of us, and we are doing our best to hang in there. I'm doing my best to not get fondled by everybody around me, because that apparently is a very common thing, right?
Then stop wearing such tight pants.
This is true. I am wearing outfits that could be inductive to the reasoning on why I am being diddled.
But we're not talking about that today, are we?
This is the part of the joke. We clarify we are, in fact, just joking. We are instead talking about the Allagash abductions in Allagash, Maine. So we are staying in the United States.
Yes, we are. So the Allagash abductions, also known as the Allagash 4, was the alleged UFO sighting and extraterrestrial abduction of 4 men on a camping trip in Allagash, Maine in 1976. Ooh. When everything was pretty groovy. So we're going to go back in time today. I want everybody, just like last week, we went back in time with some deodorant. This time I want you to grab your acid. I want you to leave your razors at home. We're not shaving any armpits. All right?
Also, don't check your mailbox because your draft notice might be in there.
Yes. And for the love of God, don't open your mailbox.
Yeah. I actually, yesterday, out of curiosity, because, World War III has been trending on Twitter lately, and I decided to Google images of draft notices, and dude, they're scary. Like, it's just such a formal looking paper that just says, hey, you're in the Army now, report here in 2 weeks at like 7 a.m. Like, can you imagine?
I would write a letter back saying, Dearest Army, I lost my war in Dearest Army, I lost my leg in the last war. Do I have to report to this one? And then they'd probably just come and grab me in a van.
Yeah, realistically, because at the bottom they did have a little thing. It's like, if you have served previously, or if you have any sort of like mental or physical, like blah, 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 or if you have glasses, make sure you bring them to like, put yourself up for review. So it's like they have like everything like noted out, but it's like, I don't know. That's wild to me that like this, like, because getting drafted is like a basically 50-50 chance that you're going to die.
Yeah.
Horribly too. So it's like, and just how formal and like bureaucratic it is. Like, I don't know. It's so creepy. So if we're going back to the 70s in our podcast time machine, like we said, don't check your mail. We're going to come back to 2020 soon.
Yes.
So just don't open that letter. They can't get you.
Don't open it.
Yes.
All right. Don't open it, because if we're in 1976, what war is that? Is that past Vietnam?
So it started in the 50s and ended in the mid 70s. So yeah, we could be on like the heel end. For all we know, it might be just about over.
That's good. Okay, that's good.
So, so spark them up, everyone. The war is almost over.
Yeah, light up the dubes.
But we are actually, and now I'm looking at it now, this happened in 76. So this is after the Vietnam War ended. So maybe there was enough unrest in the world to get the eye of a particular extraterrestrials.
Extraterrestrials. We're back to aliens this week. And as we talked about earlier, we are doing the Allagash abductions. So, the story begins with 4 men, and I want to point out up top, before anybody says anything, 2 of the 4 men have the last name Wiener.
Oh, boy.
All right, and now we are 2 men in our 20s who shouldn't find this funny. But...
Well, their names were Jack and Jim, so it's like, at least it's not so low-hanging fruit like
I mean, Jack Wiener's kind of a low-hanging fruit.
Jack...
That's the problem I have with this.
If his middle name was My or Ma.
Yeah.
Yeah, telling jokes.
All right, so we have 4 men.
Mm-hmm.
twin brothers, Jack and Jim Wiener, Chuck Rack,
Wow.
and Charlie Foltz.
I hope Chuck was like chubby enough to have a rack, because we could really just get a full circle of just comedic names going on with this little group.
You know, he might have been, because they were art students.
Oh, yeah. No. Hashtag not all art students. And I'm saying that just because I actually went to art school.
Yes, so this one's going to hit close home to you.
Oh, boy.
So the four friends they were fresh out of the Massachusetts College of Art, and that's where they had all met.
Oh.
Okay.
Were they dropouts, or did they graduated, right?
They graduated. So
okay.
So at this point, before this camping trip, they just finished graduating, and they went on a camping trip to kind of just like let loose and relax a little bit before they all started their respective careers.
Yeah. Like most, that's a healthy thing to do after you graduate. College is very stressful. You want to kind of, one last hurrah with the boys before the unending horror that is being a full-grown adult with a full-time job begins.
Precisely. So that's exactly what this camping trip was all about. So the majority of the camping trip would revolve around fishing. These guys really like to fish, which is surprising for art students, Like when I think art students, I don't think these guys are really good in the outdoors. These guys know how to catch a trout. And I don't mean, a prostitute.
Well, I mean, what?
Like catching a trout,
Oh my God, if you say so. Well, I guess you got a point, but at the same time, like it's not like they're going out and playing rugby. Like fishing is like, it's relaxing, and I can see some certain art students being in. And also, art students don't just do art all the time.
You're getting defensive.
I'm getting very defensive. My people.
So these four men went to the Allagash waterway in Maine to do some fishing. And basically the Allagash waterway is a group of lakes connected by canals, and it's nestled in the mountains of Allagash, Maine. Very beautiful. I looked at some pictures. It's really cool looking.
I'm just picturing, like, so is it like kind of like a bayou, like in Resident Evil 7, or is this like
it's a bayou is like kind of what we talked about last week, where it's kind of swamps. It's like swamps and kind of muggy,
this is more
and gross.
like, okay.
This is more of like beautiful nature lakes, like songbirds.
It can't be Louisiana. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I've already made my opinion quite clear. I've made it quite clear, all right, about how I feel about Louisiana. So this is a beautiful place, Allagash Waterway.
Okay. So we're dealing with clear skies. We're dealing with very pretty water. Nothing swampy or smelly about it.
Right, trees, everything going on.
Okay.
During the canoeing, but in between the canals, they made it to Eagle Lake, which is one of the bigger bodies of water in the waterway.
Okay.
And decided to pull into the bay to try their luck at fishing, to no avail. So they basically parked their boats in the little bay in the shallower part of the water. Tried a little fishing, didn't catch anything. Don't you hate it when that happens? I know, yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've been fishing and I'm like, where are all the fish? Yeah. You know what I mean?
You try shouting that into the water?
Yeah. Fish! Come to me!
Except the part, you forgot to mention the part about being blackout drunk while you do it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, right? No, actually, what was it? I went fishing in, weirdly enough, Wisconsin. And, dude, it was just like, 2 hours. Ironically, it turned out I'm allergic to fish anyways.
Yes, that's very true. You got to be careful, man.
Yeah. Yikes. I really shouldn't have said that. Now I'm going to fucking get assassinated.
You're going to get fish in the mail.
I am going to get fish in the mail. It's going to suck. But actually, that's not... Actually, we're still kind of in between about that. We'll talk about that on a future episode. But, lost my train of thought. But, yeah, I went fishing. It was boring. Then I caught a big one. But it snapped my line. And it was like... It sucked to not catch the fish. But, when it's the thrill of the fight, So fishing can be exciting.
Yeah.
I sense a hint of doubt in your voice.
I'm sorry. I've been fishing before. It was pure torture. So, the men then thought it would be a good idea to try night fishing out on the lake further outwards, deeper. Makes sense.
Right.
So they built a massive campfire on the shore as a reference point so they could get back to safety.
Smart.
Because it's super dark, and you don't want to be lost out there with, 3 other men.
Yeah, ooh, yeah. That
what if it turns into some kind of Brokeback Mountain situation? But there's 4 of you.
True, and then what if Brokeback Mountain turns into Cannibal Holocaust?
Yeah. Everything escalates for a reason.
Exactly.
Okay? You have to be careful out there.
Put 3 dudes in the middle of the night in an isolated area, somebody's going to get eaten.
Somebody's going to get fucked, and somebody's getting eaten, and not in that order.
Depends on the nature of the relationship and how long the night goes.
Right. After a while on the lake, the 4 men spotted an extremely bright light in the sky, shaped like an orb, hovering above the trees on the shore, about 200 yards away, they estimated. The orb was moving back and forth in slow, calculated movements. And as it moved, it changed colors. It started at red, then changed to green, like a regular Christmas tree, then to a light yellow, and it repeated the cycle over and over again. The object then started moving out over the water towards the men. So as it started moving towards the men slowly, Charlie had the bright idea to get his flashlight out, and if I remember correctly, he was in the military and he had learned an SOS maneuver you could do with the flashlight to like aircraft.
Oh.
So he did it to the aircraft.
Oh, thinking it could be like possibly like a craft or something US.
Yeah, and I don't think he should have done that because first off, it was an alien, so you're gonna get anally probed.
Yeah, that's a given.
Second, why would you SOS if you don't need if you're good to go? Then they're gonna just like freak out and they think that you're like, being cannibal holocausted by 3 other men on a boat in the middle of the lake.
True, but also I imagine these guys were pretty like, remember that time when we were like, hanging out for our nightly rendezvous and we thought there was a ghost, or no, we thought there was somebody breaking in, and we literally did a like search of the whole, like we like SWAT style, like I think maybe it's not too unreasonable that he decided to do something drastic, because those guys are freaking out. They thought maybe they might get shot down by something, or I don't know.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's true. Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes,
It was just a panic in the moment.
Yeah, so Charlie did do a little SOS with the flashlight, but he done goofed.
Uh-oh.
Because as soon as he did that, the object picked up speed and just started beelining it for the canoe.
Oh.
Like offshore, just beelining it in the sky.
Signaled it,
basically. He basically was like, hey, come over here.
Yeah.
Yikes, you don't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And as it moved towards them quickly, the men noted that the object was completely silent, which is a very common thing that people in UFO sighting cases say. That makes no sound whatsoever, despite how fast it moves.
That's freaky. It's like your nightlight coming to get you.
Yeah. The 4 men panicked and started paddling toward the shore as fast as they could, like a college rowing team, just like their little hearts just going as fast as they can.
Just like in Social Network.
In Social Network.
Yeah.
Exactly. Picture that, but with a UFO trying to get you.
Now that would make that movie so much better.
Absolutely. But a light illuminated them. It was like a cone-shaped light.
Okay.
And it started sweeping. They could see the light on the surface of the water, and it was like sweeping, trying to search for them. Suddenly, the light hits all 4 of them in the canoe. The next thing they know, they're standing back on the shore before they can even blink.
Oh.
Standing on the shore, and the canoe is slowly coming to shore as if they weren't in it anymore. But they're standing on the shore. They turn around to look at their campfire, and it's all it is ashes and embers.
So this is like we experienced with the last abduction we talked about. Something that should have happened in a long frame of time has now happened in a very short frame of time.
A very short frame of time, because they specifically built a large fire as a reference point for when they were out on the lake. That should have taken hours to get down to the point where it was at when they got to shore. Mm-hmm. So again, this missing time is very consistent in a lot of abduction cases and UFO sightings.
Okay, so this is now our second instance of this.
Second instance. They turned back to the lake, looked up in the sky, and the glowing object was still there. And Charlie, being kind of a dumbass, decided to flash his flashlight at it again. And not learning his lesson the first time, apparently. Mm-hmm. But this time, instead of tracking them down, the object disappeared very quickly into the sky. And not knowing what the fuck just happened, like clearly confused, the men turned around and they didn't talk about it. They decided not to talk about what happened. Mm-hmm. The next day, they started packing up all their stuff and they went on to their postgraduate lives, and they stayed in contact. Like, they talked to each other. They were still friends, but none of the men knew what happened really, because they said they all acknowledged they saw something, but none of the men knew what happened from on the canoe to getting back onto the shore, and then the fire was out, so they didn't talk about it.
Interesting. So it was almost like a I know what you did last summer kind of situation, only they actually don't know what they did last summer.
They actually don't know. Exactly. That's actually a good way to put it.
Ooh.
So years after the camping trip, we're going to fast forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the nightmares began.
Now, this is the part of the story where, because at first, when I was reading it, I was like, yeah, okay. It was the 70s, maybe a lot of acid, a lot of colorful things happening and stuff. But this is the part where it kind of makes you, I'm going to use my catchphrase here. It's a bit of an eyebrow raiser. It
is an eyebrow raiser. This is where it takes a little bit of a weird turn. It started with Jack Wiener, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
He had nightmares about being examined by strange beings on a metal table. Very consistent with other reportings as well. These beings had long necks, large heads, insectoid hands with only 4 fingers, no opposable thumb, and big metallic eyes, which had no eyelids.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, Charlie, and Chuck were on a bench nearby the examination table and either couldn't or wouldn't help him. But they were all obviously these guys were artists.
Mm-hmm.
They drew pictures of the nightmares they had, and also what we'll get into later, the hypnotic regression memories that they recovered. They drew pictures of it, and I saw one of them from Jack depicting this situation where he was on the table, the 3 other men were on a bench, and it literally looked like they were just waiting in line on a bench to be examined next. That's the feeling I got from it, like a doctor's office.
Oh.
It was very strange, but they were all naked, all of them.
Oh.
And it turns out the other 3 men were experiencing similar nightmares around the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, that's what's a trip to me is and that's something not outside of even alien stories, but just in paranormal or one could even say demonic situations or whatever, where there's people who do have these dreams that overlap, because that's something that's you can't really engineer that. I mean, that's super freaky stuff when it's, we see it in movies all the time and stuff, but I mean, if I had a dream about I don't know, I got an ice cream from the ice cream man, and then I went up to you, I'm like, hey man, I had this awesome dream about getting ice cream from the ice cream man, and you're like, I did too, and then it turns out we both remember the ice cream man in the dream was the same, I would lose sleep over that. That would scare the shit out of me, so I don't know. Whenever I hear something like this, it is kind of ooh, spooky.
Exactly, and it could be because of the abductions, and it could also, the example that you gave, it could also be due to a massive consciousness that we all share. Yeah. But that's a whole other thing. That's something that we could talk about in a different episode, but that's an interesting point you make.
The next stage of human evolution, one could say.
Absolutely. In 1988, which is 12 years after the incident at Eagle Lake, Jim decided to go to a UFO conference to try and get some answers, and this conference was hosted by Raymond Fowler. Raymond Fowler, for those of you who don't know, is a very popular UFO author and researcher, and he also has quite the career background. So, a lot of times, when you hear UFO researcher, what do you think? You think of some... some fucking nerd. Some pseudoscientist who just couldn't get a job at, I don't know.
Yeah, he got fired from Edison, and he's got, the raised cheekbones and the emaciated appearance, and, still wears his lab coat.
Probably wearing suspenders. Now, I'm not saying that any of this stuff is not Raymond Fowler, but he was... in the United States Air Force as a security service officer who worked a liaison with the NSA. So we had some kind of a quote unquote credible background.
Okay. But he's worked with communications and government and all that kind of hush hush stuff. So it's it's not like he's Jimmy down the street who's been unemployed since 18.
Yeah, as a UFO researcher, I wasn't yeah, I tell you what, boy, I was sitting down there on my porch, looked up in the sky, I done saw a UFO. Was it a star? I don't think so. You know what? I'm just going to be a UFO researcher, start making books about this stuff. What do you think I should call myself? What do you think I should... I'm going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a doctor. Dr. Phil Ronchev. Yep, that's me right there. A UFO researcher through and through. That's what I picture when I picture a UFO researcher.
And you listeners, if you're going through a similar process, it's not too late. You can branch out. You can still study UFOs and make a good paycheck.
Yeah.
You don't have to give everything up for it.
Absolutely. There's ways to do it. MUFON is looking for a secretary.
Oh, see, there you go. There you go.
There's a job opening in Irvine, California.
Remind me, I'm horrible. MUFON means...
The Mutual UFO Network. And
Mutual-
it's
okay.
based out of Irvine.
Okay.
And they are looking for a secretary.
So if you're listening, there's your opportunity. You can do it. You can absolutely make it happen. Follow your dreams, but also pay your bills. You can totally do that. You don't need to become what you've been meant to be at the age of 21.
Yes. I just got depressed all of a sudden.
Yeah, I don't know. It was that weird blanket of sadness.
So, after the conference, he met up with Raymond Fowler to talk about his situation, right? What Jim and the others had experienced. Ray was very intrigued by his story because there were 4 witnesses. It wasn't just like some guy, like we were talking about, the Dr. Phil, right? That guy that we just talked about earlier. He wasn't talking about like...
Not the same Dr.
Not
Phil
the
from
same.
TV. Okay.
I mean, maybe. I mean, it could have been him.
Oh my God, that would be such a twist.
Okay, now I know you told me you saw a UFO, but I'm just not going to believe you. You know, no matter how flat it is, a pancake's always got 2 sides. You know, like, it wasn't that Dr. Phil. It was the one that I made up earlier.
Right.
But when you think of somebody who has UFO sighting or abduction experience, and it's one person, sometimes it's a little bit harder to take seriously. But when there's 4 people, that's what made Raymond Fowler excited, because there was 4 people with the same story, and what he wanted to do with Jim and the other men.
And I also, just brief side note here, I want to reiterate how hard it is to coordinate anything with anybody, 3 people or more. Like,
I can't get 4 of my friends to meet up on the same day at a restaurant. Let alone would I be able to get 4 of my friends to stick with the same goddamn story about being abducted by aliens.
yeah, and not run off to somebody about. So that's something that should be noted, is that there's a consistency. It's very hard to coordinate people. So keep that in mind as we listen to as the story goes on.
Absolutely. Raymond then suggested that Jim and the other men undergo regressive hypnosis. Now, for those who don't know, and if you're listening to the show, you probably do know, good for you, is a type of hypnosis that allows you to see repressed memories or memories that have been specifically repressed.
Ooh.
Because there is like a theory that when you get abducted, the aliens and the extraterrestrials, I don't know how they do it, no, but they do like either replace or suppress the memories of being on the ship. That's why nobody like knows what happens. And regressive hypnosis is specifically to uncover bits of that, as much as you can of those memories.
It's also a great way to remember that embarrassing thing you did in 5th grade.
It'll keep you up for hours.
Yeah, exactly, man. I don't want to remember that.
The 4 men agreed to undergo the hypnosis, and they all agreed as well to do it separately. And it's important to note that they didn't contact each other or brief each other on what they remembered beforehand. They wanted to go into this fresh and see how they came out. Now, here are just a few instances that were recalled by the men during hypnosis. They all recalled being abducted that night on the lake and being examined and tested on by otherworldly beings. These tests included taking skin samples and bodily fluid samples. Now, I don't want to get too much into the bodily fluids part.
Are we going back to Jack Weiner on this one?
We're going back to Jack Weiner because there's no more unfortunate name, because you know how they got some of those bodily fluids.
You know he went pale when they were like, okay, we need the semen sample. And he's just like, oh no.
My time has come. So, yes, they took different types of samples from the men. Jim said under hypnosis, quote, They're like bugs. They've got bug eyes. He also saw his brother Jack and watched as the beings probed his eyes, genitals, and hair on his legs and his toes. So like like they skipped all the good parts and just went to the hair on his legs.
Lovely.
You know, it's intriguing.
Well, it sounds like these aliens are just the bug aliens from Rick and Morty.
Yeah, they're from what I've gathered reading like the regression hypnosis like notes and also about also looking at the pictures they drew, they're definitely insectoid.
Okay. And by the way, this happened in 76. Rick and Morty had not been made yet.
Right.
So there's no way which actually begs the question of maybe Rick and Morty might have been influenced by these.
Influenced or did they rip it off?
Truth comes out.
Jack specifically remembered that the beings had horrifying faces and would tell him to, quote, not be afraid, just do as we say, unquote. Look, if I'm ever in a situation where I get like abducted, not by even just by extraterrestrials, but just by like somebody on the street, and they're like, don't be afraid, but just do what we say, I'm gonna be a little afraid.
Yeah, I think in any situation, like even if they don't tell you to, like if they're just like don't be afraid and then nothing else, that's the number one reason to be afraid.
Like I would rather than just not say anything.
Yeah, I'd be down for that too. At least like, let you kind of be like, okay, maybe this is just a birthday thing, and maybe it's just like, I'm getting kidnapped, I'm gonna wake up and I'm at Dave and Buster's.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
If you guys, do that for my next birthday, just kidnap me in like full get up, masks, white van,
Just
trank
the
me,
whole shebang.
throw me in the back of the van.
We'd have to trank you because if we didn't, you would probably kill one of us.
I'm gonna go kicking and screaming.
Yeah, like I ain't even afraid to say that. No, like you would go full self-defense mode because I know you're trained for that kind of stuff.
I've seen things, man. Charlie described the room that they were in seemed like a doctor's office. Very metallic, right? Very sterile feeling. Like there wasn't a lot of, like even the air felt sterile.
Yeah, like recycled as if they were, I don't know, traveling through space.
Traveling through space. Mm-hmm. Chuck didn't remember much from the regressive hypnosis, but he did recall being able to see Charlie from his perspective a lot, and that Charlie was in a lot of pain.
Right.
So that was just a few things that they mentioned in detail that they saw during the hypnosis.
Okay.
After the hypnosis, the four men met up and shared what they had uncovered, finding that they had all experienced damn near the same thing. Again, can't coordinate shit like that. It's difficult. Somebody is going to drop the ball and mess up the whole thing, but they all experienced the same damn thing, and they also took a polygraph test afterwards. Now, I do want to point out polygraph tests, not the best source of, anybody.
A bit flawed,
yeah, but it's still noteworthy. It's still something like if it would be different if like 2 or 3 of them passed, but all 4 of them passed, which is interesting.
Yeah. And also too, you might be saying, I've seen Ocean's 11. You can it's a movie, people. It's not real. That doesn't like good luck. I watched a YouTube video about that.
Yeah. And that's honestly where the case itself ends. Mm-hmm. But the aftermath is quite interesting, and it's a little controversial as well.
Ooh. So now we're getting to the point when the story kind of divides a little bit, huh?
Yeah, it gets a little divisive.
Ooh.
The story of the 4 men stayed dormant for the next few decades after the hypnotic regression and all that, except for a couple of documentaries and news stories that came out about the story. And interestingly enough, Chuck was absent from a lot of these, and we'll find out why in a little bit here. In 2016, Chuck came out saying the whole thing never happened, but that they did see a UFO that night at the lake, claiming that the UFO or that the abduction story was essentially a cash grab. Like he admitted himself that he went along with the story for financial gain, but nothing ever came of it. Like they made some money from the documentaries, and they made some money from I think they made an appearance on the Joan Rivers show, and there was another one like TV talk show interview stuff type deals. but they didn't make enough money for it to be like substantial, right?
Hey, you couldn't buy a house on it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Chuck is saying.
Interesting.
Yes, and people automatically assumed after this interview that it was a hoax.
Right.
Because Chuck came out and said it was a hoax.
Right.
But after talking to the other 3 men that were abducted and Raymond, who was still in contact with these men throughout the years, just here and there, they started talking about having a falling out with Chuck and how Chuck was a very volatile person, very quick to anger. And he had always been this way, but it had gotten worse over the years and they kind of kicked him out of the group.
And that's an interesting point, that the character that comes out and says, this is all bullshit, was the one who got kicked out of the group. So, little suspicious.
Yeah, so there was supposed to be like another interview or some kind of work being done with the 4 men.
Right.
And Raymond again, just as like a re-up on the case. And Raymond, the UFO investigator, said he would not do it if Chuck was going to be there. So like, I guess Chuck was really rubbing people the wrong way, like throughout the years. Like he had just become like a total asshole.
So in other words, he was the one that had to give the semen sample.
Yeah, he was just mad because he's the one that got his G-spot. Yeah.
He's the one where he ended up getting a boner from the whole thing. And they all made fun of him for it, and he just can't quite get over it.
So long story short, Jim, Jack, Charlie, and Raymond believe that Chuck is just harshing everyone's mellow about the whole thing, man, because he was resentful that he was kicked out of their friendship group. Because friendship is everything.
Yeah, this is true. Friendship is magic.
Friendship is magic. So when he got kicked out of the group, became resentful, came out, an interview, again, most likely to try and get some more publicity to himself. Remember, he's the one that admitted going for financial gain, saying that nothing ever happened. The 3 men still stick to their word to this day that they were abducted and that everything they got from those regressive hypnosis sessions was true.
And this all happened around 2016, like you said.
Very recently.
So this is not like it didn't all happen in the 70s. Like this is like to the now.
Yeah, this is when they're older men and they're, they've been 3 out of the 4 men have been sticking with this story for decades. And they're not going after much for financial gain. The other 3 men, Chuck's the only one that admitted to doing it. So this is one of those cases where it's interesting, the conflict that arises from 4 men being abducted and then one of them saying it was a hoax and the other 3 not saying it was a hoax. And it's just like, who do you believe? Like, of course, there's not going to be any resolution.
Right.
But it's interesting. I think it's really interesting how everything kind of turned out a few years ago between them.
Yeah, kind of. Because, regardless of paranormal or not, when you take a group of people, close friends even, and throw them through a process that's traumatic or frightening or got you shook in some way, shape, or form, like that does take a toll, because the basis of friendship, of course, is interaction between, personalities and the give and take and, the respect that goes between you. But when a sort of all bets are off thing happens, that does make a difference. And it doesn't matter how much you collaborated back in art school. But that's interesting to me when the true personality kind of comes out. Also, when money is involved, everyone wants to say that they're like, no, I'd always choose, the TV show protagonist obvious choice. It's like, but no, that's not how real people work. And stuff falls apart. People get selfish. People get scared. People want to make moves. People feel wronged. People feel like this and that. And that's fascinating. And also shouldn't be too surprising that one of them is like, whether it happened or not, was like, hey, I could get something out of this. And if I'm playing devil's advocate and saying this actually did happen, outside of, getting a boner, he was also probably the guy that was like, hey, guys, like, we could really make money off this. And maybe the other friends were like, I think that's wrong. Like, no, we should be trying to, be transparent about this. And what was it, Chuck that was freaking out?
Yeah, Chuck's the one, yeah.
Yeah, so I think he was just the one that said, hey guys, like, let's make a brand out of this. Let's do something out of this. And I think the other guys might have been like, dude, nobody's gonna believe you, or nobody's gonna this and that. Like, it could be a multitude of things, but like, yeah. And that's also a lesson from life, is, friendship gets tested, and be it aliens, be it something a little bit more on the planet Earth. But like, we can talk about real things on this podcast. We don't have to
we can talk about friendship and stuff, and we can relate it back to extraterrestrials.
Which we are going to, speaking of leading things back in, we're going to lead to my favorite segment. This is why this is bullshit. I mean, obviously, one of them is already saying it's a hoax. And obviously, we do have a sort of, coordinating between four people. This is one of those situations, though, where the story does remain fairly consistent between the four of them. Am I completely sold on it? Well, this is the 70s we're talking about. Acid is still illegal.
I will bring up one thing that I read in an interview.
Oh.
But it was Chuck that said it. Okay, so Chuck's kind of a dickhead, so I'm not going to take his word 100%.
Right.
But he did say that they were smoking marijuana that night at the lake.
But marijuana is not going to make you trip out and see a ball of light.
Yes, but even if that's the case, people will never believe you about anything if you say that you were drinking or smoking marijuana.
This is true, because especially if you've never done it before, like, there's still people in the world that think smoking weed is your ticket to Satan. Like, that's what you do to talk to him. Like, it's just...
But I will say that the other three men said they were not. So Chuck's the only one saying that.
Okay. But yeah, I'm still a little like, because, if you talk about a felony in public, guess who's coming in your door?
Hey man, like, why can't I just smoke weed and go, like, look at UFOs, bro?
Yeah, right, bro? Like, it should be legal, dude. But when it's not legal, you end up in the slammer. And I think that's the last thing anybody wants.
Because he already ended up in an alien slammer.
True. Mm-hmm. That's also another thing is, how do we know, and like I said, I know I made this point before, it's kind of shooting myself in the foot, but they could have very easily coordinated this story.
I thought we were talking about how difficult it is to coordinate.
It is. Who knows? Maybe they got lucky. Maybe because the story itself is, no, because they did the separate...
They did separate hypnotisms, and they did separate polygraphs too.
Yeah. So either, and that's where I'm a little like, little split, is, did they just get lucky? And it was just one of those just happenstance. They just happened to get the story right and consistent enough to be like, whoa. Or maybe there was something there. So I'm a little torn in between about what I think about this. Do I think this actually happened? Do I think they got abducted by aliens? I don't necessarily think so, but there's a lot of stuff that happened in the story. But also, what should have been point one to begin with, it's all, what if it's just made up? It's all fake. Nothing is real. It's all...
I know that's your favorite point.
It's all a story.
I like this abduction case. I like it a lot because I like the conflict at the end of it. Mm-hmm. Is it not? Is it just because the friends split up?
Yeah.
Or, it's interesting. It's like, you don't get any real, answers at the end. Like, okay, when you think of major hoaxes in the paranormal cryptid alien world,
right?
I think of the Patterson Bigfoot film because on his deathbed, one of the guys that created the film said it was a hoax. Right. That is what's the word I'm looking for? That's closure, right?
Yeah,
that's closure on a case. But with this one, we have a 3 against 1. And I think the conflicts is super interesting. Do I think it happened? Fuck yeah, I think it happened. Of course. Why do you think I'm here, man?
Well, and it's hard too because Chuck totally comes off as a dick. That's I think what really makes it the skeptic in me wants to believe him, but he just feels so much like the antagonist in this situation that it's like I can't help but want to think that the other three are onto something. And because they played such a mellow role in it, like it's when you get the raving lunatic, I got him, dog, like that's when I'm like, yeah, okay, bullshit. But these guys were playing it very cool and very not invasive, not very in your face about it. So there is a part of me that's like, oh, like, you know, I mean, I know I never really watched the X-Files or anything like that, but it's like that. I know enough of the quote to say, you know, I kind of want to believe though.
That, yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm here too, man. It's kind of fun to believe, huh?
Yeah,
it's kind of fun to like, because it makes your problems feel like not that much of a problem. Like,
right.
Yeah, maybe I'm $10,000 in debt. Maybe I missed my last 3 trips to the doctor's office when I was supposed to go in for blood pressure appointments. Mm-hmm. But you know what? None of that shit matters when there's 3 million different types of alien races out in the multiple universes. So like, if that shit's true, I don't have to worry too much about it.
Yeah, because
so that's what gives me a feeling of peacefulness. Mm-hmm. You know, like, yeah, maybe I'm depressed. I'm just. It's the segment where I just name off all my problems.
Yeah, where we turn into the counselor podcast.
But yeah, that was the Allagash Abductions, man.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting, and like, I'm so new to all these stories and stuff, which is like half the reason I'm even on this podcast. But it's like, it is really cool because I think, if anything, believing it or not, because the point of this podcast isn't necessarily to make you believe one thing or the other, but also to see the experiences and what they do to people and like the aftermath and like all that stuff, because whether it happened or not, the repercussions were very real, and whatever did or didn't happen affected these men's lives very distinctly.
Yeah, if whether it was a hoax or not, whether they wanted it or not, it's affecting them. Yeah. And that's, you know, and that is the point of the podcast, that we want to talk to you guys about this stuff. We also want to put that comedic twist on it to kind of make it more swallowable, if you will. Huh.
Yeah. Something that our boy Jack Weiner might be interested in.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jack Weiner just got the worst of it, man.
Yes. What if he just got like the easiest treatment of them all too? They just like saw your name, they're like, yeah, you know what I mean?
You poor fuck.
Yeah, we'll just give you a couple slaps on the butt. We'll look at your eyeballs. We'll call it a day.
Oh yeah, and if you guys, this is nothing compared to something I have in mind for an episode coming up. The abduction of Whitley Strieber.
Oh,
he got molested.
Oh boy. So we'll definitely have to jump more in depth on that on another episode. So stay on your seats. You don't have to be on the edge of them. I know that's a little uncomfortable for extended periods of time.
Yes. Also wanted to let you guys know we did order some new recording equipment.
Yay.
It is going to be coming in time for episode 4, so hopefully there is a jump in quality you guys will notice.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. We'll actually have 2 mics instead of 1.
Can you believe it? We are sharing 1 mic on top of a stack of books right now.
Yeah, literally. Because it's at just the right spot. I actually think what is this, a Zelda Twilight Princess HD box?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful and a lot of fun stuff to look at too.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming with us on this journey. Episode 3 is done, making our way along, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, so stay tuned. The reckoning is coming. We'll see. But till then, you guys have a good day, night, or commute, whatever you're doing right now, and we will see you on the next one.
Don't drink and drive.
That's dangerous.